my name is Runia, and to introduce my subject, I would like to start off with a story from when I was in middle school. So in middle school, I was obsessed with two specific shows, BBC's Sherlock and Criminal Minds, both of which are crime shows that kind of use psychology and deduction to solve the crimes. And I thought they were so cool and amazing that I started mimicking the characters from the show to seem that I was really cool and smart, to the point where I'd go up to my friends and I'd be like, oh, I can see from the paint stain on your shoe that you painted your house red this weekend. And they'd look at me so weird and be like, no, we just had art class last period, you're kind of weird. And then they'd go to lunch or whatever, and that was basically my entire middle school experience. But recently I was thinking about these shows and I thought, I'm kind of wondering how much of their interrogation processes and techniques are exaggerated. And overall, yes, they are very exaggerated. Crime shows aren't 100% accurate to what is going on in real life. But as exaggerated as they seem on television, there does seem to be some relevance within the television process through the use of general verbal communication, nonverbal indicators, and the methods that are used. All of which are topics that I plan on going over. So, to start off, we got methods. There's this man called James Orlando who wrote a research report on these interrogation techniques, and he listed these three as the most commonly used around in the interrogation process. Both all have their own purpose. Starting off with the Reed method, this is used basically on subjects who are inherently guilty. Basically, you're just trying to get a confession out of them. They did the crime and you're trying to make them admit it. Next is the Peace method. This is basically used for subjects who probably know something about the investigation and you just need more information to move on. Basically, they're not involved in the crime whatsoever. They're just a mother or a friend of the person or the suspect. Next, we have the kinetic method. This is used on someone who you don't know is involved, how they're involved with the investigation. There'll be someone who typically that you'll be able to find out through nonverbal methods, and that is what that method is all about. So, starting off the Reed method. There's three things that are done before you go into the interrogation process, which is analyzing the subject's involvement, understanding their behavior, and undergoing the 9-step interrogation process. Basically understanding where the subject is and going into it, understanding how they distribute their anxiety. So there's a lot in the 9-step interrogation process because it's 9 steps, but I summed it up in 3 easy methods. So the first 4 that Orlando lists are positive confrontation, theme development, handling denials, and overcoming objections. All of these can be summed up as introducing guilt. You're going to go into the room and basically say, oh, well, you're guilty because this is what the evidence leads to. And then you're going to develop a theme. You're either going to act very angry to them or you're going to sympathize with them. If you act angry towards someone who maybe is anxious all the time, they might get more anxious and more emotional to the point where they accidentally confess it themselves. Or to someone who's very stoic, you can go in and sympathize with them to the point where they will confess to you on a moral ambiguity. And then the next 2 are procurement and retention of the suspect's attention and handling the suspect's passive mood. To sum it up, it's leading the subject through their emotions. You're going to go in there and you're going to talk to them, and when they get emotional about something, you're going to press on that and start asking them more questions about what's making them emotional, or you start focusing on their nervous tics and see if you can get them to exhibit more nervous tics. If they completely stay passive, they're not going to confess. If they completely hide their emotions, they're not going to confess. So basically, you're going to focus on that. And last but not least, you're going to be inviting a confession. You're going to go up to them and you're going to presenting alternate questions, basically using justifications to get them to confess. Say, oh, well, I definitely would have done that if I was mad at my boss. I completely understand. Honestly, I could see you getting off as just self-defense, or using justification to make them shy away from the idea of I'm going to be arrested, and start using it as, oh, well, the cops understand me, I can confide in them. And last but not least, we have converting an oral confession to a written one. Just record before you go into the interview process, maybe let them know that they're being recorded, or at the very end, maybe if they're in the mood for it, sway them into writing down what they wrote. Next, we have the PEACE method. So this is actually an acronym. P stands for preparing and planning. Basically plan what you need from the subject and basically go in with a list of questions and ask them about it. E is engaging and explaining. You're going to go into the process and explain to them, hey, you're not in trouble. We just want to get some information to you. It's probably in your best interest to reveal this information to us. We promise we want to get to the bottom of this. It reduces anxiety and also allows the person to be more upfront with what they're dealing with. A is account, get their narrative and what is relevant to the investigation. Don't try to make them seem guilty or focus on their nervous tics 100%, because most likely if you're going in with the PEACE method, you already know this person's not guilty and you want them to be as comfortable as process throughout the entire process. You just want to focus on getting them to reveal what they know. Last is closure and evaluate. When you close with them, sum up all the information back to the subject to exclude any errors in their narrative that you may have picked up from their communication. And last, evaluate their narrative and see how it fits in with the investigation. Last but not least, we got the kinetic method. This, again, as mentioned before, is confronting someone's nonverbal cues. You don't know where they stand in the investigation. They could be guilty or not guilty, and you're going to go in there and you're going to focus on their anxiety and you're going to focus on their nervous tics, basically asking them the questions about the investigation, who they are, how they are, and see what makes them emotional and what makes them nervous and what distributes guilt. Next, we have general verbal communication. So there's this organization called Changing Minds, and they listed the different types of questions, which are also listed in our book, but they kind of explained how they're used in the interrogation process, which I thought was really cool. So to start it off, there's opening with closed questions. This is essentially establishing a relationship with the person going in there. You're gonna ask, oh, are you thirsty? Are you okay? Is it cold in here? You're not gonna ask anything about the investigation yet. Next, we have free narrative questions. So you're going to start off with questions that invite them to tell a story. You're going to say, so you were standing on the corner of 3rd Street. Can you tell me what happened next? Basically, inviting someone to go on a tangent about their story, telling their point of view. You kind of want them to just spill all their information out to you. Number 3, direct questions. So this is used to gather information from the subject about the investigation. Anything that you're confused about, just ask them about. Yeah. And this kind of goes along with cross-questioning. If there's something that's making them nervous or something that they might be hiding, focus on that and continuously ask them about specific details from the story to see if they're switching it up. For example, if you're going in there and someone says, oh yeah, my wife is standing outside the room, maybe throughout the entire rest of his story, be like, so your wife was outside, your wife was at Target, your wife was inside the room. How did your wife react to that? See if they change their story. See if, oh yeah, my wife wasn't outside the room, she's right next to me. See if they continuously change their story, because if they're changing their story, they're coming it up with it on the spot. And last is reviewing the questions. Sum up all the information, see if they change anything. This also helps you lead the subject into thinking that this is just standard procedure and they're not guilty of anything. Next, we have nonverbal communication. So when it comes to nonverbal communication, there's the subject and the interviewer that both have important roles in this. So when you're interviewing the subject, you need to focus, as mentioned before, on their anxious tics. Are they shifting their eye contact? Are they tapping their hands or their feet? Are they blinking fast? Are they breathing irregularly? Are they getting embarrassed about something? How are they reacting? What's their emotional state? However, this also cannot be as accurate, considering someone might just have anxiety, or someone might be emotionally tied to the case, which would lead them to have different behaviors. So this doesn't necessarily mean if someone's tapping their hand a lot during the entire questioning process, it doesn't mean they're guilty, it just means they're anxious. So you gotta focus, make sure that nonverbal communication does not equal confession, because it doesn't. Next is the interviewer. The interviewer needs to make sure that they can read the room. If someone is revealing information, make sure that you're not getting super excited or acting super weird with your emotions. Just make sure you have a poker face and completely understand that this person is revealing important information and get their account. Next is relevant emotions. This kind of goes in with the read method. at the very first part, when you're kind of introducing guilt to them, you want to focus on making sure you're displaying the correct emotions that match the person. If you guys can relate on one another, you're most likely going to confide in one another. And so yeah, overall, these are kind of important. They kind of can help you decide if a subject is guilty or not, or if they're anxious or emotionally tied to something. So lastly, how can we go over this? There are different tips that we can use in daily life to use this. Number one, you can find out if someone is lying to you. If someone straight up tells you a story and you can see that they're anxious about the entire story, shifting eye contact, changing their story, you can call them out on their bullcrap. Number two, be a pro at reading the situation of a job interview or work interviews in general. You can know the different types of questions that are going to be used and whether or not the interviewer is gonna hire you from the moment you step in. If they're kind of distributing boring behaviors, or maybe you're distributing anxious tics, you can focus on those and make sure you limit those to very little at best. Next is meeting new people. You can understand how they feel about you, and you can focus on who they are as a person, or how to get them to reveal certain things about them to confide in them. Number four, being able to understand the validity of someone's story. Basically the same as number one. You can focus on whether or not if something someone's telling you is truthful or not. And number five, it's kind of cool. Overall, it kind of makes you feel like some of the detectives, as mentioned in the stories at the very beginning. And I thought it was also cool how the interrogation process can be used. So yeah, interrogation techniques.